It's a wonderful year here at Kobold Press. Hey, would it be a Kobold Chats if I didn't accidentally mute myself at one point or another? Thank you for letting me know. See, this is why I love having you all here. Welcome to another episode of Kobold Chats. My name is Kickstarter Kendo, whichever you prefer. I said it once, and now I'm saying it again because I was muted the first time. And I said it again, or I said it before, and I'll say it again. Happy New Year from Kobold Press. I hope you all had a wonderful holiday season, gifts, food, all of the things that I said before that you couldn't hear, and I hope your new year is off to a wonderful start. I started the stream muted, so that's letting you know how mine is going. We have sorry, my brain just has to recalibrate after to start this year off with here at Kobold Press. We're doing an interview today, our first interview in a while, with two writers from the upcoming Tales of the Valiant Game Master's Guide. Yes, I've been telling you to prepare for it because it's coming sooner than you might think. And by sooner you might think, I mean it's coming. The Kickstarter starts this month, so if you aren't already signed up to be notified by Kickstarter that it's happening, right now is a great time to do it because you don't want to forget. I just threw the link in chat. You can go check it out. Please, you're going to want to be notified because guess what? It only lasts for 4 weeks. 3 of those weeks are going to go by really quick. They're going to go by quicker than you think, and you're going to forget, as we all do, as I do with every Kickstarter, until I get the, hey, there's only 48 hours left email. And then I'm like, oh no, how did I forget this thing? Because I didn't click to be notified. So go do that. It'll make your life easier. Trust me. And we're going to talk a little bit about what is in this Game Master's Guide today with Sarah Madsen and Mike Welham, who have worked with Kobold Press in the past, working with us now, and hopefully will continue to work with us in the future. So before we get into that, I have one last thing. You're going to want to stay until the end of this stream because I have an announcement like no other. You have never heard this announcement before. I guarantee you, because they are coming. It's coming out of my mouth first. So stick around. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk to Sarah. Sarah, Mike, thank you so much for being here. Please, Sarah, if you want to introduce yourself, then Mike.
I was in a lot of the Warlocks, so you've probably seen me in the Warlock layers and the zines if you were lucky enough to get in on that while it was still rolling. I've also written for Wizards of the Coast and Draco Studios and a ton of other stuff. So it's kind of my full-time gig. So yeah.
Amazing. I'm so sorry, I did the same thing that I did for myself to you at the very top. If you could just give your name and pronouns again, and that'd be great.
Hi, Sarah Madsen. Pronouns are she, her. Did they get the whole spiel or just okay?
They got okay. That. It was yes. That I remembered it as soon as you started talking. But thank you so much for that, Mike.
Hey, Mike Welham. He, him. I've been doing design. Since about 2010, and my doing a lot of work with Kobold Press. The Book of Drakes was one of the first things that I got published with them. I've did work for Tome Beast 3, and I have a monthly blog article for expanding the tomes. So basically taking some existing monsters and juicing them up or changing them around, so people that have memorized the books for some reason have some surprises.
it's sometimes you need a little surprise, because there are a lot of times where I'm very rarely in the player's seat and the GM throws a monster and I immediately go, okay, internally I know exactly what's gonna happen. Sometimes you need to spice it up a little bit. You know, and the Game Master's Guide is here to help you do that. If you don't already know what the Tales of the Valiant Game Master Guide is, where have you been, first of all? But second of all, it is a nearly comprehensive, like almost completely comprehensive guide for game masters of any game. Would we like for you to use it for Tales of the Valiant? Absolutely, yes. It has Tales of the Valiant on the book. But it is a guide for running any game, genuinely. It has tools across the board for how to deal with specific kinds of players, or how to communicate with specific kinds of players, how to do session zeros, how to build a campaign, how to use pre-existing stuff. So many tables. So many tables for basically anything you could need. How to homebrew. If you are running a fantasy adventure game, the Game Master's Guide is you're going to want to have a copy of it on your shelf or in your PDF files or wherever you keep your games. It is absolutely amazing, and these two wonderful people helped make it amazing.
Hello.
Sarah, I'll start off with you. So Sarah, you worked on the chapter talking about adventures and campaigns specifically.
Yes.
When reading the outline, I saw that there is, like, at the very top of it, there is a section about the different genres, or what you call flavors of fantasy. What are those? What do you mean by that?
Oh gosh, so fantasy is such a wide umbrella term, right? Like, it encompasses so many different types of stories and settings and things like that. So when we talked about flavors of fantasy, we wanted to kind of like hit the high points of the most common flavors of fantasy, like high fantasy, low fantasy, weird fantasy, science fantasy. What else do I have in here? Oh geez. Sword and sorcery, portal fantasy, all of those different types. So, if your players or you aren't necessarily familiar with Dungeons and Dragons or other tabletop games, but you're familiar with the books and the movies that you watch and you consume, and you're like, I really want to play a game that feels like Lord of the Rings, or I really want to play a game that feels like going into Narnia, or things like that you know what that is, and you can look at this and figure out, what kind of fantasy is that, and what are the trappings of that kind of fantasy? What would I and my players expect to find in a setting, that a portal fantasy, like going into Narnia, you're going to be probably a fish out of water. There's going to be fantastical, amazing things that are very different from what your characters would be used to in their real life. High fantasy, lots of magic, things like that. So it kind of, it's little brief paragraph blurbs about each one to kind of help you figure out the tone and the flavor that you want to go with your own game.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, especially as a game master myself. I try to go into my games with a lot of intentionality, and part of that is understanding the genre that I'm trying to play in. Because once you understand the genre and you understand its conventions, or know at least a little bit of it, right, you can start playing with them. You can start twisting them. You can be like, oh, like typically, right, and like in Portal Fantasy, you're going from like a mundane situation to like a more fantastical situation, but like there are ways you can play with that, and like I think like, it's super cool. Like I didn't even really think about Portal Fantasy as being a genre of fantasy until you said it, and I was like, oh yeah, no, that makes sense. But it's like sometimes you just need it explicitly stated for you to be able to, grok it in that moment.
Yeah, and it's a lot of fun, like you were saying, to really kind of take those expectations and kind of play around with them, or twist them, or flip them on their head, so that you want to keep things that your players are expecting, so it feels familiar, but then you can throw something completely unexpected at them based purely off of the genre that you're playing in. So
yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Moving on to Mike, you worked on a lot of the combat stuff and like additional rules and variant rules about combat. And my initial question for you is, you know, as a game master personally, I'm a social encounter kind of GM, and so I tend to have some hard times, I think, making combat memorable. I try to make sure I use combat when it's most important, but making like this specific like moments in combat memorable, right? And I'm interested in how, you know, you can use the mechanics of the game, right, and ways you change how monsters work and how specific rules work, or adding additional rules. Like, how, in your mind, how do you use those rules to help heighten combat and make it memorable for players and for game master as well, I guess?
I am not always mindful about this, but I try to I aspire to have cinematic encounters in my combats. So I'll have props and environmental effects and things like that. So if people want to swing from a chandelier in the middle of a ballroom or something like that, they can do that and make an acrobatics check or something along those lines, because the rules provide that for us. And you know, it's basically if people want to just swing and hit monsters, that's fine too. So it can accommodate that. But basically, with the section that I did, it was adding a few more options for players to do various things against the opponents or to help others, and dealing with different environments.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of that is like, especially like with environments, as you were saying, is a big way to like. There are a lot of fights that happen in grassy fields where nothing is going on, and there's a lot of it that's just kind of on like flat ground. And one of the big things that I like about TOV is that very intentionally there's a lot of people that get climbing speeds now, because that adds verticality to combat and like those kinds of things. I'm interested in what your favorite rule is to you. Like, what is your, whenever you're like, I need to spice up this combat a little bit, what's your go-to?
Oh boy, I like rules where you can kind of maneuver opponents around. So like the shove rule, or there's a reposition rule that I added to my section. Also little things like, let's say somebody's got an amulet they're wearing, and you got your halfling that's in there, and he says, oh yeah, you know what, I'm kind of, I like that amulet, or that amulet's messing me up, so I'm going to try to grab it from you in the middle of combat. So basically just some additional options, or some options that you can try during combat, rather than just a straight up, swinging swords or firing crossbows.
Yeah. And I think having those options, similar to the genre thing, right? Having it explicitly listed helps a lot, right? Because there's a lot of times where, like, technically there's a lot of that stuff where if like a player comes up with it, you're like, oh yeah, make like a sleight of hand check or something to like, oh, grab this, right? But like, there's a lot of time players a lot of times just read the things that are on their sheet and try to make decisions off of that. And if it's not there, right, as an option, I imagine it can be hard to like think of it off the top of your head. And that goes to like talking about building worlds as well, right? Sometimes you need that option listed to help guide that person to start thinking more creatively.
Right. And yeah, it's nice to quantify that. And also, like you said, you can kind of build off of that. And maybe there's an option that isn't explicitly stated, and someone says, oh, well, it works kind of like this, so I will do this, and for this kind of thing. So if you want to shove someone off a ledge or something like that, or you use use natural features in a cave or something like that to deal with opponents.
Yeah. Sarah, I see you nodding
No,
your
yeah,
head a lot.
yeah, no. We talk a lot about like, well, it's D&D. You can do whatever you want, and as the GM, you can do whatever you want. You're in charge of this world. You can make up rules, but sometimes players and GMs both need permission, like explicit permission, or like this is a thing you can do. Like we sometimes get caught up on, like you said, what's on our sheet or things like that. That having things spelled out can be like, oh, I'm allowed to do this, and also that gives me an idea for something else. So yeah, I think it's great.
yeah, and that's like, that goes from combat to world building to adventure design to monster design. Because I remember before, in a time before I even knew what Kobold Press was, right? And I'm at my local game store and I see the Tome of Beast 1 right there on the shelf, and I open it up and I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about all of these cool things that you can do, right? Like, you can tell it even in improv, right? There's a reason why they ask for a suggestion generally, depending on the style, because our brains work better if we have if we have a foundation and we understand what something is at its core. We can start building out from there. But if we have nothing to latch onto and we're just like given a blank canvas, it can be really hard to do that. Which is why books like this are really good. Usually. That's why we make Game Masters guides.
Exactly.
Ooh, is this a question? Happy New Year. Sorry, don't try. When is the Game Masters Guide going live for Kickstarter? It is going live this month. I cannot be more specific than that. But I can tell you to go. I knocked something off of my desk, but that's fine. I can tell you that you can go on over to Kickstarter right now, and if you're not already notified, you will be notified within 24 hours before it starts. And again, the day that's going to be is sooner than you think. Yes. So as I said before, and as we kind of confirmed, all of us have been game masters to various degrees for potentially various different games. And this is a book for game masters running any kind of game. I'm interested in what kind of advice what kind of advice would you have liked to had when you first started game? Like, if you're, the younger version of yourself seeing a Game Master's Guide on the shelf, right? What kind of information in that moment would you be expecting to have that you now know that you'd be like, I wish I could just tell myself that, and it would have saved me so much trouble down the years worth of struggle gone. You can take some time to think about it.
I might have touched on this a little bit, but a framework for how to deal with various situations. Not outside of combat, even like you were talking about, you do a lot of social encounters. Mm-hmm. Basically, is there do I have a framework for how to resolve a social encounter and what the outcome of that social encounter is based on, checks or role playing or something along those lines.
Yeah, that makes sense. Which, lucky for you, if you were getting the TOV Game Master's Guide right there, there's an entire chapter just about social encounters, which is great.
Fantastic.
I think for me, and I touch on this a little bit in my chapter, is the concept of player agency. That with these games, not like, unlike novels, you're not in charge of the entire course of the story as the GM. That the players are the main characters, and you as the GM are not there to be the main character. You're there to facilitate their fun. I mean, it's supposed to be fun for you too as the GM, but to make sure that when you're taking when you are, building your quests and your adventures and having to adjust on the fly, as you always have to do because players inevitably go in directions you don't plan on them going, that finding the fun for and the story for the characters is gonna be the best way to keep everybody involved and make it fun for everyone, even if it's like, well, that wasn't the plot I was trying to build. They've totally messed up well, okay, we'll just fix it, it's okay. Adjust, it's fine. So
yeah, no, that makes it's especially hard for new GMs, right? Because you're trying to, you've been put in a role where you have to try to help facilitate the fun for everyone else and tell a story and do all of these things, and you want it to be good. You want it to be good, and you want people to like engage with it and have fun. And so sometimes you pull on the reins a little too hard. You're like, oh, I have this really, really cool story, this really cool character I want you to see. And you have a hard time letting go and letting players do the thing that players do best, which is make choices.
Well, and I think there's some people come into it sort of as this concept of it's the GM versus the players, instead of everybody playing together. And I think that, the players also need to be on board. And I think that's part of what, going back to session 0 and stuff, talking about the kind of game you're going to play, what the expectations are, so everybody's on the same page. But it eventually, you are here to be part of the fun, not to be a wall that the players are slamming themselves against again and again. Like, you're not winning the game by TPK. I mean, unless that's what you guys wanted to do when you started this, but generally it's about the fun everybody's having together, and they are not your adversaries. They are your partners in crime, I guess.
Yeah, so. Exactly. And it's a thing that I think a lot of GMs have to eventually learn one way or another.
Just a little anecdote. I had a recurring, campaign. I had a recurring villain that basically just messed things up for the characters, and he was going to be in the campaign until they reached level 20 and the final battle and all that. They cornered him and killed him
like early
on, and he'd already done a lot of chaotic things, so it was very sad. The players were really satisfied when they killed that character off, and I'm like, okay, I gotta let this guy go. I guess I'll have to plan for something else now, but
sometimes you're not killing your darlings, your players are killing your darlings.
Exactly. And I didn't want to take that away from them, especially, like I said, they were like cheering that they'd gotten rid of this guy that had been such a thorn in their side.
That's so we've all had an enemy NPC go just like a little too early before you're ready to let them go, but hey, sometimes that's how the dice roll. I see someone has asked, how does the book improve exploration portion of the game? I can help answer this. There is an entire chapter called Advanced Exploration that is going to go over different kinds of environments and like how to like run exploration in those environments. Dungeons, how to run them, how to make them, what puzzles and riddles are at their core, and how best to implement them. Additional rules for, running dungeons and like exploration, how to do chase encounters, how to run adventures in like extreme climates, really hot, really cold, really rainy, anywhere in between all of those things. I'm sure there's other weather, and then like how to run the game, like, and how to explore the idea of getting lost while exploration, like what to do when you're lost and how to handle that, and how to make getting lost fun. So entire chapter on exploration. That's kind of like the book is really trying to expand on basically every part of running a game: world building, exploring, doing combat, doing social stuff, building, like all it. When I say this is a comprehensive, this is like almost a 400-page book that is I think it's like 390 something.
It's big.
It's
I don't
big.
remember the exact page count, but yeah, it's chunky.
It's a chunky book, and it's got a lot of information in it. So if there's an idea that you have, or like a thing that you're looking for, there's a good chance it's in there. There's a really good chances in there. Advice: don't play with power mad buttheads. If anyone's old enough to know what MC-20 Atlanteans, I'm talking about back when I'm not. I'm sorry, I'm not old enough for that, so I do not know. Yeah. Oh, hello, Kai. Welcome. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about what advice you all would have liked to have when you were younger, right? Now I'm interested in what didn't make it into the book that you were writing, you were like, oh, I want to put this in, I have this idea, I want to do this. Is there anything that ended up on the cutting room floor that is still advice, information, ideas for rules or kinds of rules or kinds of creatures for combat? Is there anything that was a really good idea but just didn't fit?
I got all my stuff in.
Okay, well, that's great to know.
Yeah, I wrote pretty tightly to the outline that I had. So, but yeah, the adding player agency section was not in there originally, but I was like, this is something I think is really important. So it may end up in my section, or it may be touched on somewhere else, but it's in there. So.
Oh gosh, well, I had a couple of chunky sections in the combat. In the outline, I had to do mass combat and siege combat, and there is a breadth of options for siege combat and for mass combat, and I had to pare it down quite a bit, and would have liked to have had a little bit more room, but I already sailed past my word count for that section.
You had a lot to say. Now, siege combat. I want to talk about that because I think everybody had so. I guess, can you break down for you and what's in the book? What is siege combat specifically?
Okay. You have a defender who's trying to protect a smallish bit of land, usually with a fortification, so a castle or something like that, and of course the people within, and then you've got an attacker who's coming along with their armies and their siege towers. You also, as a defender, have your own kind of counter siege towers, and countermeasures against the attackers. So the idea is for the attackers to use their siege weapons to break through your defenses and overrun the area you're trying to protect. Or, and I do cover this a little bit, you could have a siege where your attackers are basically just waiting out the defenders for resources. So that's definitely a goal that you can have for a siege, is just waiting for them to run out of food and wait for morale to dip and people to basically try to escape or swap sides or things like that.
That's a fascinating because I understand that as the historical way that people, but I've never thought of putting rules to that, or having I've never thought about that as an option, probably because there's never been rules for it, right?
Right.
Of how to deal with a siege on that kind of macro scale of oh, this isn't just sitting down doing combat, this is a waiting game, and that's super interesting to me.
So yeah, it was a little bit of fun, and I mean, it's not a scenario that's going to come up often. So I mean, that's why it fits as an optional rule. But I could see an adventure session that deals with the PCs maybe trying to hold the line against a siege, and maybe individually and there are some things where the players can do some individual things to affect the outcome. It's not just throwing catapults and
Yeah.
ballistas and stuff like that. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of what kind of what I hope to convey in that section with the siege. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so cool. We have a question about this actually, from Rawlings Warren. Wow, that's awesome. Mass Siege. Is it a whole like extra game, or is it just based on the normal rule set? I think
It's
sorry, go for it. If you already
oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to clarify it, but if you understood it, go for it.
Yeah, it's based on the rule set with just some extra kind of mini rules
Mm-hmm.
to handle the siege weapons and things like that. We have a vehicle section that will have
Mm-hmm.
towers and things like that. So it's just trying to work within the framework of the rules
Mm-hmm.
to enact sieges.
Yeah.
And again, with a little bit more space. And I think there are whole source books out there for conducting sieges and mass warfare.
Yeah. You don't see a lot of mass warfare in a lot of fantasy tabletop games anymore, despite the fact that that
No.
is its roots. But we
Yes.
got a little bit more specific, I guess, to dealing with on the ground. Thanks, MCDM gave a whole extra game. Oh yeah, I don't remember the name of the book. I helped kickstart it. It's somewhere on my shelf. But yeah, no, yeah, that's I think very similar. But if I'm remembering correctly, the MCDM one is like, yeah, really hard to get across to 4 players. Yeah, because it's like a whole extra like rule set. It's like an entire mini game that takes place in it and extrapolates. I like that this one is built off of the rules that we already have, because
Yeah.
it doesn't require me to learn a whole extra game. Not that I hate learning games. I'll learn any game. But if I'm just to do like a combat or maybe like a couple of combats, learning a whole extra game on top of it is a little much. So having
Yeah.
build off of the bones
Now,
of
now the mass combat does diverge from has its own kind of rule set a little
uh-huh.
bit because you got to kind of abstract out how to represent armies and units and things
Yeah.
like that. But it's still very similar. That you've got like a hit point total or an attack bonus versus
Mm-hmm.
an or a defense bonus. And so you compare you roll your d20 and you compare those and then apply the results depending on how that turns out.
Yeah. It's built off the thing that we already know. We don't have to
Right,
learn it.
exactly.
Yeah, we don't have to learn
Yeah.
additional things on top of it. A question from Michael for Sarah and Mike. What section of the book are you really excited for people to check out? Other than your own, because I feel like your own would probably be it.
I haven't seen the rest of it yet. I've
Okay.
only seen mine,
I
but
I can give you a list of what they are.
I mean, I've seen the outline and I'm definitely interested. I'm interested
Yeah.
in the exploration section because I definitely think that's an area that can be fleshed out.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's just so much meat there, and like trying to make, okay, you travel for a week across the swamp interesting is a challenge, I think, for everybody. And I feel like a good meaty exploration chapter will definitely help with that, to make it feel like it's part of the adventure and not just the interstitial, oh, we have to say we're traveling for 5 days so that it feels like, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm also interested in Mike's chapter because I'm excited about like more meaty combat like options and things like that, because I feel like that's an area that I can improve upon as a GM is like you said, not just combat in the middle of a field,
Mm-hmm.
creating more interesting and dynamic combat stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Mike.
And I'm going to say I'm interested in Sarah's section about the different types of fantasy because honestly, I have a very kind of narrow field for my fantasy, and so it'd be nice to see some other options and maybe explore those with some games.
Yeah. I mean, both of those are. I love combat, or I love learning about combat and trying to do combat better. So I agree with you, Sarah, that I'm a, I'm really interested in vehicles. I'm looking at the full outline. There's a section in here on vehicles, which is a thing I have been interested in trying to figure out how to do properly in tabletop games for years, because I find it's specifically a thing that I find hard to express to players, the motion, the speed of combat on vehicles, and just like how to do it in a way that feels right. Also combat wise of like how to deal with like, hey, I want to ram into this person, or or dealing with different speeds of vehicles. Like I'm hoping that it has some stuff in there about that, because that is something.
Get your Mad Max on. Yeah.
There's a bit in the combat section that I worked on that deals with vehicle combat, or vehicle to vehicle combat. So
yeah, I'm excited for that. There's and also like this whole book, I'm looking through the outline, the table of contents right now, like it's a menu at a restaurant. I'm having a really hard time choosing what I really want. Will there be any elements of the GMG that will have specific suggestions and ideas for TOV? From my understanding, all of the rules and monsters and stuff, and you can talk a little bit about this as far as the combat side of it, Mike, that all of while the book as a whole can be used for any game that you're running, the rules that you will, like the specific mechanical homebrew rules for stuff for like combat and like dungeons and puzzles and like what stats you're going to use, to my understanding, is all going to be built out of TOV, but from an ideological standpoint, it can be applied across the board.
Yeah, I know my chapter at least is there's not a lot of rules in my chapter. There's a couple of rollable tables for inspiration and things like that, but it's more about generally how to craft encounters and quests, or not encounters, but quests and adventures and campaigns and things. But I do know that the plethora of random encounter tables
Which I really want to get to these random encounter tables
are more specific to Tales of the Valiant. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the combat, the combat section doesn't really reference anything, I think, specific to Tales of the Valiant, that I can think of, but
outside
I might be
combat.
forgetting something that I included in in my sections.
Completely understandable. I'm looking at some of this, and I can only imagine that some of this might be TOV specific, especially looking through the adventuring options where we have diseases, traps, magic items, artifacts, sentient magic items. A lot of... I can only imagine that they would write a magic item that would work in TOV for it. So I imagine that there's going to be a lot of TOV specific things in here, but the ideas are broadly applicable. Oh, we're getting a lot of questions now. For Mike, do you know if there are monster templates specifically for making demon lords or high level villains and NPCs? I don't know if you worked in the section.
I don't know specifically, no.
Yeah, I have it all up here.
I was gonna say, Kendo, that might be in the outline.
See. We have combat encounter building, encounter templates, setting and terrain, special combat scenarios, aerial combat, underwater combat. Okay, wait, it might be not. Oh, here we go. Monster templates. There are monster templates in the homebrew toolbox, which is chapter 8.
Okay.
So having not read the book, since the book's not out, and I haven't been allowed to read it yet, but looking at this and seeing a monster template section, I would imagine the answer is yes. Will the material in the GM guide be added to the Black Flag SRD? I don't know the answer to that.
I'm hopeful.
Sorry, I was making sure that Kim didn't already answer that. There is, I can't give you an answer on that because I genuinely do not know. I know that a lot of the TOV stuff is going to be added to the Black Flag SRD, especially once the full books are out and available for people. But Kendrick Kendo, I cannot guarantee that for you because I don't know the answer to that. But as soon as I do know the answer, I can let you know. I will probably be letting you know in a Kobold Chats.
I, Mike Welham, not a freelancer for Kobold Press, and I'm hopeful that this will be available in the SRD.
Yeah. For building better villains after. Oh, sorry. Okay, that was that. Okay, cool. I think we've gotten through all those questions. So here comes my relatively final thing. Let's talk about these tables. Because I know both of you all worked on. There are so many tables in this book. If what I understand to be true is true, can you give us the names of some of the tables that you worked on?
Well, a lot of the tables I worked on were the random encounter tables.
Okay.
By terrain, so it's broken down by. I think I'm allowed to say it's broken down by tier and by terrain. So, if you need tier 1 monsters found in a desert, here's a rollable table for a random encounter. And there's a lot of them. There are many.
Do you have any favorites? A favorite, like not necessarily tables, but favorite entries into a table where you wrote it down and you were like, oh, that's gonna be good.
I'm sure I do, but let me tell you, when I tell you I wrote at least, I don't even know how many of these things I wrote, so that will have to hold on a minute. I'll come back to that one. But I also have some tables in my section that I did, and they're not big, but they're little rollable tables for, figuring out an adventure setting. If you're like, I need an adventure and I don't know where to set it, you can roll on that. Figuring out who your quest giver is, who the antagonist is, what the antagonist's personality traits are and what their goals are and things like that. So you can let the table decide for you. You can use it for inspiration. You can look at it and say, none of these sound right, but it tells me exactly what I do want. So yeah.
Yeah, and that's, kind of going back to what we started this off with, right? Talking about sometimes you need things to be stated explicitly, even if you don't use something on the table, right? Even if it's just for inspiration or like you don't even like any of them, it starts pushing you in a direction where you can start thinking, more creatively. And especially like stuff for like adventure stuff where it's like, who's your quest giver, who's the villain, what's their personality, what are their goals. I think that's a lot of design that we've been seeing out of a lot of like single page RPGs like Honey Heist and things of that nature, where like you just need this is every possible, like these are all of the major things that you need to know about it, roll on this table, you have an adventure you can start running immediately. It's super useful for both new and experienced GMs to be able to like, I want to run something last second, or I have no ideas for the next thing that's going to happen. I think that's super cool. Mike, what tables did you work on?
The combat section is somewhat table free. There is a section dealing with for an option for injuries in combat. So let's say you've got a particularly nasty critical hit or something in, and so then you can roll on the table and say, oh yeah, you just bruised or broke your opponent's arm, so it means they have trouble swinging their sword. So there's a table for that where you can randomly decide what the effects are for a nasty hit. But then also ties into that table, also ties into cult shots. So if you want to do a cult shot, which is more difficult to do, of course, then you can pick what you want the effect to be from that table rather than it being a random result.
That's so good. I love that. Frog Prince, treasure tables for monsters or critical roles. I think what you just said, Mike, might have answered the critical roles portion, but treasure tables for monsters, that's a good question. I see that there's a rewards expanded section in here. What would it be titled? I'm trying to think of what someone might title it to see if I can figure out what section it might be in. It could be in rewards. Rewards expanded kind of makes sense.
Probably.
There's no like loot thing on here to make it easy.
Now,
go for it.
As far as the encounters section, I worked on Arctic, Badlands, and Coastal, and there was an Arctic encounter that a little fun where you run into these, and it's low tier. You run into these kobolds who are wholly unprepared for the weather. And basically, it's like the you know, do you fight the kobolds? Do you help them out? You know what? And then there's a little bit in there that if you do help them out, then they reward you, that kind of thing. But it would be a pretty easy fight because they are just like, they're freezing in the, because they don't have any furs or anything like that. They're just stumbled into this Arctic environment.
I know I would choose to help them, assuming that they weren't aggressive towards me immediately. But that's just sad.
I did find one for mine. I did. Oh gosh. Well, this one is in the forest. It's a playful blink dog follows the party and steals an item from a PC when the opportunity presents itself because it wants to play chase. So it's basically like grabs stuff and tries to run away again. I mean, there's plenty of like the standard, fight stuff, but tried to give it a good mix of things that weren't just fighting or weren't necessarily fighting.
Yeah.
And I did desert, grasslands, farmlands, forests, so many. What else did I do? Mountains, hills. I think I had 6 total, but it was a lot. Like my brains were melting in my ears by the time I was done with it. So yeah.
I imagine. And the thing sorry, go for it, Mike.
Oh yeah, so for mine, I did some natural hazards. Like Sarah said, a lot of fight. But then there were some things that are like kind of foreshadowing, maybe something like all of a sudden for the coastal, I had a bit where all of a sudden these dead fish roll up on onto the beach. And it's like, okay, what's that all about? So kind of little adventure seeds in a way that maybe the players will want to chase after.
Yeah, and I love that a lot because I think like a lot of people, especially for like in exploration, right, when you're doing like random encounters, like you travel for a couple of days, you 4 wolves pop out of nowhere because that's what the table said, right? And especially for me, I personally don't like doing combat during travel portions, or I don't like doing like a lot of combat during. I don't want every day for it to be the same. Okay, roll on the table. Another group of things come out of nowhere to attack you, because that kind of bogs down because travel is about getting from one place to the next, right? And the more time you spend in the middle of that, it could get kind of bogged down. And I love this idea of using tables, not necessarily just for, what do we fight today, but what do we experience today? That kind of informs what we're doing, or maybe just adds even a little bit more flavor to the world. I love the idea of just running across other traveling groups of people, or kobolds, or like whatever, and it doesn't have to be a fight. It's like, they are also in a situation. Why are they traveling? Why are they out here without furs? That's adventure seeding, right? There's so much that can be gleaned from that about the either a new adventure or just building out the world and making it more flavorful and making traveling feel more fun than like arduous and grueling. That's really cool.
Yeah, I have one in here too that's in the grasslands. That's basically like the PCs come across like the grasses have been pressed flat in sections, basically like crop circles that like they find, but like it's not necessarily, there's no necessarily like associated combat, but yeah, like Mike said, where it's like, what is this? Like why you can move on and get on with your adventure, or you can like try to investigate, and it's a seed for both the players and the GM. So yeah.
That's super cool. I love that. I love that so much. This last question that I will take, do you plan on any optional player options such as class features or optional talents? Looking through this, I don't believe that this specific book has any additional player options or class features and optional talents. I have heard whispers that such things are in the works, but I cannot go any further than that, because also I'm not the person having those conversations, so I don't know. But as far as the Game Master's Guide goes, this book is specifically about giving game masters tools. This is a book for the GM who is running a game, hopefully TOV, but any game. But the player's handbook is going to have everything that we currently have for TOV. And don't forget, it is 5e compatible, so anything you have for 5e does also work in here. So when you get the book, you're not just getting the things in the book, you're getting access to everything you've already invested into a brand new game that is so far pretty dang good. And I'm personally very excited for the Game Master's Guide as a forever GM myself. But with that, we have come to the end of our show. Quite sad. It happens every week, but it doesn't get any better. Thank you, Mike and Sarah, so much for being here. It's been a joy talking. I hope I get to talk to both of you again. Sarah, if you can let everyone know where they can find you on the internet, if you have any upcoming things coming up that you want people to be on the lookout for, now's the time to let them know.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, or I guess X now, whatever. It's at Unfettered Muse, and my website is also unfetteredmuse.com, and you can find, all the things that I've contributed to, links to my novel, which I have, and all of that jazz. As far as what I'm working on right now, so I'm along with the stuff I'm doing for Kobold Press, I'm a lead designer for Draco Studios for their Dragon Bond RPG 5th edition setting, and we just finished our Kickstarter for Elise's Guide to Magic. So if you're interested in a lot of fun, cool dragon and magic stuff, you can check that out. And we just released the PDF of our first book called Itza's Guide to Dragon Bonding, which has rules for like dragon riding combat and all sorts of really awesome stuff. So I'm doing that with Brian Suskind, who they might know. He's also a Kobold Press contributor. So yeah, check that out. It's pretty cool.
Amazing. Mike, where can people find you on the internet? And do you have any cool stuff coming out?
Okay. You can find me on Facebook, and I have migrated to Blue Sky. I'm at MD Welham there. And I have, there's a friend's blog that I post pretty regularly, Munster every Friday. If you search for Frightful Fridays and look for the WordPress site, you'll find me there. It's Mythopoeic Rambling, so I could spell that for you, but
give me 1 second. I might be able to find it really quick. Wait, what did you say it was on again?
If you look for Frightful Fridays in WordPress.
Oh, Mythopoeic Rambling. Yes, okay. The thing you just said. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Amazing. Ooh, Dungeon 23, week 47, I see. From that was
I did a whole year's worth of Dungeon 23 inspired monsters.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna pop this right into the chat so people can see it. I'm also gonna pop Sarah your Twitter. Awesome.
And
well,
I hope.
Go for it.
I hope the next time I will have a working camera, so I apologize for that. Thank you for having me on.
No, again, thank you for being on. Your voice and your thoughts were more than enough to sate me. Hopefully it was enough to sate our audience as well. And hopefully next time, maybe we will get to see your wonderful face. Well, unless either of you have anything else, thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And guess what? We're at the end of the show, which means I can finally say the thing that I was going to say before. And that is 2024. We're doing Kobold Con, a Kobold Press original online convention at some point in 2024. I can't let you know the dates just yet, but we're gonna have online events. We're gonna do a whole thing. We're gonna do a huge announcement for all of our things coming out in 2024. There's gonna be community games the whole weekend. We're gonna be doing actual plays. It's gonna be a lot of fun. And I can't tell you that much more now. I'm only allowed to I was barely allowed to tell you today that it was coming. So hey, just be on the lookout, all right? So thank you all so much for coming to Kobold Chats. I hope I see you next week, same channel, same time. And don't forget to go out, eat enough food, drink enough water, get enough sleep, and take care of yourself. Because self-care is very important. And don't forget to love yourself like I love you. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
And...